Halo, selamat siang semuanya, sahabat Tempo. Saya Purwani Diah Prabandari, Managing Editor of Tempo English. Kita berjumpa lagi dalam program Tempo Talks. Cuman kali ini sedikit berbeda. Jadi Tempo Talks Special International Women's Day. Dan kita mengambil tema Invest in Women, a Huge Benefit for the Nations. Jadi investasi kepada perempuan, keuntungan besar bagi bangsa. Karena hari ini 8 Maret adalah hari perayaan bagi perempuan di seluruh penjuru dunia untuk segala pencapaian dan untuk saling memotivasi untuk terus berjuang untuk kesetaraan gender di berbagai bidang. Tahun ini perayaan Hari Perempuan Internasional mengambil tema Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. Jadi investasi kepada perempuan mempercepat kemajuan. Tentu kita berharap demikian. Menengok laporan World Economic Forum dalam Global Gender Gap Report 2023, kita bisa melihat indeks kesenjangan gender global Indonesia sebesar 0,697 poin. Indonesia menempati peringkat 87 dari 146 negara di dunia. Cukup tinggi ya. Jadi indeks ini didasarkan pada 4 hal: pendidikan, kesehatan, dan kelangsungan hidup, kemudian partisipasi dan peluang ekonomi, serta pemberdayaan politik. Sebenarnya ada yang bagus, kondisi di sektor pendidikan itu paling bagus ya. Lainnya masih terseok-seok, termasuk di ekonomi, dan yang paling rendah adalah partisipasi politik, hanya 0,181 poin, jadi rendah sekali. Nah, untuk membahas masalah ini lebih dalam, saat ini di samping saya sudah ada satu narasumber. Sebenarnya ada 2 narasumber yang siap berbicara di volume ini. Yang pertama adalah Ibu Valerie Julian. Selamat datang ya Ibu Valerie. Ibu Valerie adalah the Resident Coordinator of the United Nations in Indonesia. Nanti ada Mbak Nia Dinata. Dia adalah, tentu teman-teman sudah pada kenal, dia adalah produser atau sutradara film di Indonesia yang cukup populer, terutama ada film yang ngetop, Cow Baukan, juga ada banyak lagi film yang lain yang ngetop. Karena Mbak Nia masih terjebak di kemacetan, jadi kita harus meninggalkan sebentar Mbak Nia ya. Nanti Mbak Nia melanjutkan, so we have to start with Ibu Valerie here. Jadi kami nanti ini program akan campur-campur ya, karena Ibu Valerie tidak begitu bisa bahasa Indonesia, jadi nanti bahasa Inggris dengan Ibu Valerie, dengan Mbak Nia dengan bahasa Indonesia. So Ibu Valerie, it's really an honor to have you here, especially in this building.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here too.
And this is, you almost live from your post in Jakarta, right?
Indeed, I'm going to leave at the end of this month. I'm completing my mission, so yes, it will be 3 years and a half in Indonesia.
It's quite long. So, is there any good or most memorable that you will bring to your country?
Oh, there are many things. I must say my time in Indonesia has been very rich and intense. And I must say, having worked in almost all the regions of the world, I have seen different setups. I worked many years in Africa, then in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, and now in Asia. And already what I can say is that Indonesia, of all the countries of the world, it's among the most beautiful ones. The Indonesian people are absolutely kind and warm and pleasant, and I must say, I take that with me for sure. But it's also a country that is full of potential at all levels, economically, from the perspective of biodiversity, and also with so many people, there is also a richness at the level of the human capital.
Because right now it's special for International Women's Day.
Exactly.
So we're talking about women, right?
Exactly.
And then I know you already more than 3 years in Indonesia, and I'm sure that you observe a lot of issues on women, right? So what do you think the state of women in Indonesia right now in terms of gender inequality, and probably there is, I don't know if you see any good sector that is really good for the gender equality in Indonesia?
First of all, I think before talking about Indonesia, we have to look at the status of women in the world. Because if we were focusing on Indonesia, it may give the impression that maybe it's only in Indonesia. But unfortunately, even when we look at the level of women in the world, some progress have been done. Of course, many progress actually. But still, the reality of women in the world is one of discrimination, of lack of access to opportunities, lack of participation politically, plus the unfortunate issue of gender-based violence, sexual violence that continues to plague the life of women all over the world. And actually, you know that within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, there is one goal that is dedicated to gender equality, goal number 5. And when looking at the result, midpoint until 2030, we realize that only 15% of the indicators have been achieved. And all the other indicators are not yet there, and some of them are totally off mark, and we know that they won't be achieved globally. So what it means is that the situation of women in the world is not one of equality. We continue to live in a world that is heavily dominated by men. Laws are dictated by men. Opportunities for job and education are given to men, and that's the reality. So in Indonesia, well, unfortunately, doesn't stand out as an example of the contrary. Indonesia is also, I would say, at the same level as what we see around the world. There is still a lot of disparities that exist, both economically, politically, at the health level, and therefore I would say the situation in Indonesia is also one that warrants, that demands that more progress be done.
But the number in the education sector it's better, but in the economy and politics, that's still so low, right?
Yeah, of course, if we look at the result of the SDGs, now if we want to take some figures, and I take my statistics with me to be sure that I don't say stupidities. Yes, at education level, Indonesia has achieved parity in terms of access to school. Both boys and girls have access to schools in equal numbers. That's very good. And actually, as a matter of fact, we see also that more and more women are coming out of universities, having a high degrees. But interestingly, despite having a higher degree, you know, very often than men, they are still less paid, you know? The same way that you have 50% less women in position of professional, 30% less women than men in managerial position. So where let's say the crux, the strong part of the women workforce is actually in MSMEs and in the informal sector. So
that's the big one.
That's the big one. So one can say, yeah, okay, that's good, they still work. But still, the women participation in the labor force is about 52%, whereas men is 85%, you know? But then when you look at MSMEs, then you realize that, for instance, out of all the employees in MSMEs, and by the way, I'm sure you know that
65% of the SMSs
65% of the
women, right?
employed people in MSMEs are women. But you know what is interesting with the MSMEs is that they represent 97% of the global employees of the country, so that's good. But so you see, all these figures that I'm giving you then just show that despite having good education now, and sometimes higher education, they still don't have the same access, the same opportunity, they are not given the managerial position, and they are not paid equally. So at economic level, that's really a problem. So yes, education is there, but more than education, we need to unlock the economic opportunities, you know, and this takes a lot to do so.
So what's the impact of these inequalities?
Well, there are different inequalities. Here we are just talking about the economic inequality. So if we look at the impact of the economic inequality, because I would like us also to talk about other type of inequalities.
Also the politics itself.
And yes, the political participation is also very low.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have, women are not given the opportunity to participate in the economic arena, that's for sure. The impact is at different level. There is still a high level of poverty among women, because when you are not educated, there is very little qualified job that you can access, and therefore your income will continue to be low. So the impact is on an overall poverty among women. being poor, what does it mean for a woman? It means that very often, therefore, that woman will depend on a man. And unfortunately, what we also see is high level of domestic violence, gender-based violence, that is actually increased. The lower the educational level of the women, the higher the level of violence and gender-based violence. The impact is also, let's say, at the level of nutrition, because not only the women will be poorer, will have less opportunity to access the market, but also their children, they will be themselves not well nourished, so they might give birth to children who are not very strong to start with. And then after that, the way they will feed their children, due to a lack of education, they might not feed their children the way they should. This is how in Indonesia, you see that we still have a high level of malnutrition and stunting. And you see stunting in children is a serious problem, because if you don't get the good calories when you are a child growing, it means that you don't develop your brain properly. And if you don't develop your brain properly, then you can't study, then it's a vicious circle. So the consequences are at the level of economy. And globally, all the studies that have been done...
The quality of human resources.
The quality of human resources, but let's talk about money, because people love money, okay?
Okay.
If you had women involved in the economic sector the way they should, because they represent half of the world population, the GDP would increase by 22%. 22%. It's
huge.
Enormous. It's enormous. So that's the economic level. And political level, with such limited participation of women, where women do not participate in the formulation of laws and policies and plans, most laws and policies and plans will of course not contemplate the need of women. And because the laws and policies are discriminatory, do not give opportunities for women, then it's a vicious circle that perpetuates a situation where women can't flourish as they should.
Okay. So the cause or the root of this problem, one of the root of this problem is about the regulation or the policy of the government, right?
It is. I mean, that's one of the causes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then is there any other causes of this problem? It's like culture or, I don't know, besides of the policy of the government. I mean, it's like sometimes the value in the community or in the society is also created into this problem.
Let's say laws and policies reflect the leadership you have. Okay, these are the parliamentarians who are making the laws. These are government entities that are creating the policies and the programs. If those are dominated by men, with only a male vision onto society, of course they will be unbalanced and discriminatory. But you're right. You could say there are other countries where it's a bit different. The other factor that impacts very much on this situation is the overall culture of patriarchy, where men dominate. Men are considered as superior. The preference to boys. If you ask for a young couple having a child, expecting the child for the first time, what do you wish to have? Oh, I wish to have a boy. You know, if the world was only constituted of boys.
Wait to get, the fifth boy.
Yeah, exactly.
Baby boy.
And if you had only boys, then you would have no world. That's very simple, because without women, there will be no humanity. So that's very clear. But the fact is that patriarchy stems from culture, from tradition, but also from religion. So all these factors combined have reinforced the position and the situation of men all over the world, where men decide. And you see, we're discussing about laws. Don't you think that it's absolutely ludicrous when you think of it, that when it comes to issues such as family planning, access to protection, these laws are voted by men. So men decide what women should do or not with their bodies. Let's, for 1 minute, reverse that situation. Put an assembly of women voting and decided on the body of men. Do you think it would go down well? No, not at all.
Big no.
No, big no. That's it. So that's exactly what we need to change. Why should men decide whether women should or not take a contraceptive to have children? Why should men decide whether women should or not do an abortion if they have an undesired pregnancy, and so on and so forth? So you see, there is an overall culture and tradition, and by the way, tradition is often used as an excuse. Oh, we have been doing that for so many months and so many years and so many decades and so many centuries. So what? We know that, for instance, long time ago, we were enslaving people. Well, that was the tradition before. Then we have evolved and we have understood that we have to stop. Not everything that is tradition, not everything that is culture is good.
Yeah. Okay, before we continue, I think Mbak Nia has already arrived, so please, Mbak Nia, join with us here. Hey, happy International Women's Day.
Thank you so much.
Silakan.
Yes.
Jadi macet di mana, Mbak Nia?
Everywhere.
Banyak. Karena kayaknya seru ini, banyak demo sama banyak kegiatan ya di mana-mana. Tadi lewat depan istana atau?
Demo, yeah. People in my office, they went on
in front of the palace.
Palace, yes.
Okay. I think there is a big demo there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's in front of the Parliament building. It's also Bawaslu. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So senang sekali Mbak Nia sudah bergabung di sini. Jadi nanti kita melanjutkan dengan Mbak Nia, tapi kita melanjutkan dulu dengan Ibu Valeri dulu ya Mbak Nia ya.
Of course. Continue.
Jatahnya telat, jadi belakangan juga jatahnya.
Yes. Continue, please.
Okay, so we talk. This is about the condition of women in Indonesia and also in the global world. We already talked about the problem, the root of the problem, and then right now what do you think about the solution? Is there any good solution from all aspects? I mean, it's from the government, from the religious communities, or from the traditional communities also, because the traditional value is from this community too.
Of course, there are solutions, and that's thanks to those solutions that we have already progressed, I would say, compared to some centuries ago. And I'm actually personally glad to be born now and not to be born 200 years ago. Imagine. Right. Already now it's not really paradise, but what was it for women then, 200 years ago? Yes, there are solutions. First of all, we need to start with education. That's a very important step. If women continue to not have access to education, then all the series of problems that I mentioned, including maternal infant mortality, by the way, we didn't discuss about that, but this as well stems from all this. So we need to give education to women and give them the same opportunity to the same type of education. For instance, nowadays, we are in this era of artificial intelligence. Everything is digital.
Yeah.
And the digital divide still exists enormously between men and women. Nowadays, if you are not connected, and if you don't know how to be connected, you are lost in this world. Because most services are actually distributed digitally. Even health nowadays. Okay, you have telehealth. So if you don't have access to telemedicine, you are somewhere in a remote area, you are a woman, and you have not been given these digital skills, you are lost. How do you access money and bank and everything? So education, but equal education to all, including in terms of science, technology, math, and so on and so forth.
But it's also education for men too.
Of course. Of course, I mean, men also should be educated.
Yeah, I mean, it's like education about this issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, of course, we should also educate men to understand. I would say the promotion of the values of equality, that's the second part, if you want. And this is where maybe religious leaders come in, where maybe traditional leaders and communities and everybody come in. Because changing the mindset is certainly the most difficult part of it. And usually, we can see that let's say prejudices, preconceived ideas are more contagious than COVID. And they are actually passed from generation to generation. And therefore, that's why it's important that we work, because with the children, you can slowly change the rest of the social fabric. But we need to intervene at all levels. So education is really key. Now, as I was saying, women in situations where they are equally educated as men, or even more, still have less opportunity to get managerial positions, to get an equal pay. That requires very strict laws and policies that government should enact. Because it has to be said that at equal level, women should be given the opportunity until such time there is 50-50% representation in the company.
So do you think there is a necessity to set a quota?
Not a quota. I'm not talking about quota, because why should we say, well, for women, let's give them 30%. Why so? Women represent 50% of the population. Therefore, they should not be given less than their representation. The only quota that I would agree with is parity. It's equality. So all settings, whether it is economic, social, political, or else, should have an equal representation of men and women, simply because the world is composed of half
With
women
no
and
numbers.
men. No, the number is 50%. The number is 50%. That's it. You know, the quota level, I'm not saying no to the quota, because I know that quotas have helped in many instances years ago to advance the cause. But now too often, some governments, some politicians like to hide behind the quota. Let's have 30% of women. You know, like, yes, we're going to be happy with 30%. No, sorry, we have 50% of women at the door. So I would say parity is essential. And to have parity, you have to have laws. Because if we count on the change of mentality, then we can wait for a long time. And my grandchildren can come and talk to your grandchildren on this show, and we'll still be in the same situation as today, you know. But also we need to have, in order to make some progress, more and more stringent laws when it comes to sexual violence and gender-based violence. Because this is also a reality that exists today. You see, that's a sad part, that women are still exposed to high level of violence, and that as women, we are not as free as men to go about the world. You see, I'm slightly older than you, so I can remember in my young time, actually, the situation has worsened. Because when I was 20, even 30, I could go into the street, you know, at any time, and I wouldn't really worry about something happening to me.
Okay.
Nowadays, I'm a 60-year-old lady, and I go outside in the street equally to my 20-year-old friends, or 30 or 40. Are we happy going at night in the street? Do we feel comfortable? No, because there is the threat of being attacked, of being raped, of being victim of violence. Why should women live with that fear? This is not acceptable. And in order to address that, we need very stringent laws that punish severely violence against women, domestic violence at home, but we need to address all this spectrum. So there are so many issues, I would say, but you see, the objective and the solutions start with the government, but go down to the people and call in all the society. But sometimes you have to force the people. And this is where a framework of law and good governance come in, because in my country, for instance, that is very developed with
Where is your country?
My country is France.
Okay.
That is very developed with good framework of law and so on and so forth. As soon as the law starts to go down, then violence goes up. And nowadays we see also high level of domestic violence. I mean, there is a woman, a French woman killed every 3 days in France by her partner or husband. This is not acceptable. Why should women be killed by their husband or partner? How many husbands or partners are killed by their wives? There are a few, but how many of them? Really, it's a minority. So you see, we need to change an entire image. And then the last point, I think, I will give you the floor after that. The last point is that we have to change the communication around women. And that's a much greater, the image, and I know you work on film, so certainly you help with that.
Which
because
one?
the objectification of the body of women being used only, you know, and to show their body and so on and so forth, that is not okay. You know, women are not object. And I must say also women have to be shown in films also having the same responsibility as men. How many women presidents you see in movies? How many women, because it reflects the reality of the world. But the communication around women also has to change.
You work everywhere in the world, before in Jakarta, I think. And do you see any best practice for equality in women and men in the country? I mean, it's like any country that have a best practice of it.
Actually, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, they are the ones that have progressed the most, where they have parity at political level, and lately, very often, their prime minister or their presidents are women as well, and where women and men have the same access. Look, for instance, even maternity leave, when a woman delivers a child. In those countries, men and women have access to maternity leave, so in such a way, or paternity leave in that case, if it's a man taking it, but to make sure that when baby is here, why is it that it should be only the woman stop the work for a certain time? No, men will also stop their work to take care of their baby while their wife can go back to work. So those countries are a good example. But this has been done with very strong laws, a good implementation of those laws.
That's important.
You know, investment in money. You need to put money in gender equality. An overall culture that has been much more open to speak openly of those issues. And this really has helped in pushing those issues forward.
Okay. Do you think the Indonesian government has done a lot to close this gap?
I think there is a lot of work to be done in Indonesia. As I said, there has been progress. I just don't want to underestimate the progress that has been done. I welcome it because indeed, if we compare to some, let's say, decades ago, the situation has improved. But we are not there yet because the level of violence is still very high. Look at the political participation in today's government has 5 women ministers. That's it. In a government that is composed of 30 men.
Actually, it's quite big if compared with before.
That's it. That's what I'm saying. There is
progress,
Yeah,
but still work to be done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Ibu Valerie.
Great.
That's
What a
really
great
great.
input,
Yeah, that's
Valerie.
we
Thank
still
you
have
so
lots
much.
of homeworks,
Yes.
not just Indonesia, in the global community. Kita lanjut ke Mbak Nia sebenarnya. Ini Mbak Nia
Can
nih.
talk in English.
Ya karena
Oh,
kita
okay.
supaya ini aja,
Oh, I see, okay.
supaya yang nonton juga bisa
Okay.
campur ininya. Jadi kalau misalnya di dunia film ya Mbak, ini jadi kondisinya gimana perempuan di dunia film? Katanya kalau dulu tuh kan ceritanya kayaknya banyak banget yang negatif, aduh serem-serem gitu ya kalau di dunia film gitu. Nah tapi kan kita nggak tahu ya bagaimana sebenarnya.
Well, let me tell you how it is in the film industry. So when I graduated in 1994 and came back to Indonesia from the US, there is no Indonesian films. So I went into TV commercial business, still shooting it with film. And after the reform era, after the Orde Baru, the new order fell down in 1998, then there is no censorship for the script because before even our script need to be censored, Valerie. So I started to make films underground, right? With all of my women friends from the TV commercial link group, yeah. And then the one fact that I'm very proud of is after the reform era, there are 4 Indonesian films suddenly. 3 of them produced by women.
Oh really?
Yes. As
I
a
forgot
journalist,
about it.
you have
Yeah, I
to know.
forgot about it.
Because first is Pasir Berbisik, The Whispering
Okay.
Sand, produced by Shanti Harmain, directed by Nen Agnas, my colleague. It's a women's perspective
Dian
film.
Sastro,
Dian
right?
Sastro,
Yeah.
first film of Dian Sastro. Second film is Cabaukan, produced by
yours?
Afi Samara, my good friend, a woman from my college years, and then directed by me. And then the third is Ada Apa Dengan Cinta, What's With Love, a teenage rom-com, directed by Rudy, a male, but produced by Mira, a woman. Wonderful. One is horror film, made by male, directed by male.
That's the
Fine,
difference.
that's fine. We like alternative. So we have 4 films alternative after the reform era. And then last year, 2023, we have 126 film in 1 year.
Wow.
After the reform, only 4, right? But I'm sad because last year I didn't make any film. From that 126 titles, only 3 are directed by women, were directed by women. So as the time goes by, everybody now have access to film education, to capital to make films. There are more and more growth of Indonesian films, but the women are still like 3, 4, so it's stagnant. So that's the fact and the reality. And then I asked all of my women's friends, like I adore Nan Ahna so much, and because it's a fact too, women are picky. If they have the choice, they don't want to do like commercial horror, bloody film. They want to do something that touches their heart.
They don't want to compromise.
They don't want to compromise, which I agree to that, But sometimes when, you are the head of your family, if you are a single mother, then you have to do as your producer and all of the like big film studio told you to do. Make this horror, do this, do that. And that's the economic side of it, right? But as long as we have choice, I respect those choices. But I want to talk also about film education. Indonesia used to have only one film school before the reform era, and like 15 years after the reform. Now there are already several film schools flourishing.
Not only in Jakarta.
Not only in Jakarta, ISI Solo, ISI Jogja, the art school in Solo and Jogja, and in Padang. Those are the 3 very good ones. People are doing internship in my film company. But when I talk to this college students or fresh graduate girls, sometimes they say, we are minorities in our school, okay? And then we rarely feel safe because of the professors. In art school, the professors hasn't been educated about sexual violence. So if they are like, because of you're a woman, it doesn't have to be violence like rape, right? It can be catcalling or harassment or saying that, if you're not my student, I will date you. It's really putting the girl students down mentally. So it's like that. We haven't been able to tackle that issue.
It's a lot of in campuses.
In a lot of general campuses, but especially in cinema, because 95% of the students are male, right? And this 5%, they don't have any safety net, So that's the reality in Indonesia. And I think I agree with Valerie. Education is the number one thing, but we also have to educate the educator to respect equality. No catcalling, no dating your students, like respect. And I think Indonesia need to be trained about respect. Because if you already understand respect, whether it's in your college, whether it's in film school, in film location shooting, or in tempo, in journalistic, because women journalistic, I have a lot of women journalistic friends, they feel like even the journalism industry are so misogynistic that doesn't make them feel safe, right? So I mean, that's the harsh reality that everyone should work on and start with the basic respect training.
That's really basic.
Yeah, basic, but people forget about basic, Valerie. Yeah.
But do you have any experience by yourself?
Absolutely.
This, yeah.
When 1994, I was an assistant director in the TV commercial industry, because before the reform era, people are still allowed to direct TV commercial from the US, from France, from Thailand, Australia, New Zealand. So they like to hire like big brands, like to hire male, white director. And I'm the assistant director, freshly graduate. Why? Because I can speak English. I went to school in the US, right?
Yeah.
So I can communicate with all of the team according to what the director wants. And I see a lot of, some of the directors, they think I'm the assistant, so they can also, you can come home with me after the shoot. What? It's 3 a.m. No. You know, I don't want to go to your hotel, I have a home. You know, stuff like that. So we just have to be tough. But not all of us can be tough, right? So everyone has different psychologies. So it happens to me too. And when I first made my first feature, Cabaukan, I was pregnant.
Oh, yeah,
Yes, you know that, right?
remember.
And then like 30% of the investors, 30% of even like the senior actors that are already signed the contract to be in my film, very, very senior, they like, oh, but she's pregnant, can she direct? It's like, why? What's the problem with the pregnant woman? I feel stronger when I was pregnant. So it's a double, what do you call it? Double discrimination. But we just have to continue because I find I am privileged to found really good support system. Women in film, also feminist male in film that supports us. Not many, but there are.
Still,
yes.
yeah. So what woman needs to survive on this industry or even to grow well there?
Find your support system. If you want to work, do your research. Find out that director. If you want to be an assistant director, if you're a woman, choose a woman. That's safe. But we are not a lot, so find out about that director. Google him. You know, sexual harassment case name. Now it's easier than my time. Sometimes it
Because
pop
of
up.
the social media?
Social
or
media. So even if there is a protest or if there is something, it's a red flag, right? Because it's even for the young people. Find out about that film company. Have they ever had a case about violence and stuff like that? I think that's the only thing, because social media can be good, can be bad. So that's the good part. You can do your research. I think that's the first step. If you want to grow, you want to join different companies, because mostly in film it's a freelancer, right? We are like freelancer people. So that's the most important, I guess.
So what do you need from the government or any institution, the formal institution, to help this condition?
From the government, I think I really need the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Ministry of Education and Culture to work together to find a way to empower the female students, not only in the film and creative industry colleges, but also I think in everything, to penetrate the knowledge about gender equality, about respect, about what are sexual harassment, what are sexual violence, so, and then what are the punishments so they don't do it. I think that's the basic things too. From the educational level, even from the, what do you call it? Before elementary school, the kindergarten, right? To protect our girls and children.
Wow.
And
You want to add?
No, but this ties very much to what I was mentioning when I was mentioning very stringent laws and policies. Because sometimes, you know, this issue of harassment, sexual harassment and violence, it is an epidemic. You know, it's like an epidemic, really. And laws really are there because you need to protect women. So you need to give them the full protection of the state, and it starts with the law and the implementation of the law. And I would like to add one point, if you allow me, because I think as we were discussing, I would say the challenges that women face, we talk about education. But how can women be educated when they are married before the age they should be married? The issue of child marriage is also one that is very much problematic in our world today.
Okay.
You know,
Indonesia's number is still big.
and the numbers in Indonesia are still big. It is estimated that about 16% of the women that are married today, that are major but married today, have been married before they were 18, you know. And sometimes they are married very, very, very young. When you are married at 11, 12, 13, 14, it means that you can't continue your education, you can't continue even your physical development. And this has an impact on infant mortality, maternal mortality, as I was telling you, on poverty, on nutrition, on access to job, everything. This issue of child marriage is really a plague that needs to be addressed. And I would like also to mention one aspect that is also important because it stems from the basic human rights. The issue of FGM, female genital mutilation and cutting. Yes. It is still existing in Indonesia. It has progressed immensely. Compared to some decade ago, the situation is much better. But still, as per the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection, there is still 55% of women and girls that have been cut in Indonesia. 55%. And let's not forget that the very approach of FGM and cutting, the female genital mutilation and cutting, stems from the same culture, tradition, religion that we talked about, right, which is completely male-dominated, dictated by male, and that has no ground in any logical sense.
So there is no this mutilation, the genital cut.
Because they said it's circumcision.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, I got circumcised when I was young because my
That
parents didn't know. And then I made a documentary about that.
Oh, really?
Yes, in 2008. I produced a documentary about that in 2008. Because it's a tradition.
What was the location?
The documentary,
The documentary.
In Indramayu.
Oh, that's
and also in Jakarta. I interviewed
Even
some
in
of my
Jakarta
friends
still?
in Jakarta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's 23 minutes documentary, but it's just showing that because of religion and they don't call it mutilation at that time. So it sounds like, oh, we have to do it, you know. But according to the UN, women and everything, now we call it female genital mutilation. So, because it's actually mutilation, right? But the tradition, our tradition made it sound as if it's circumcision, something that is harmless, harmless,
Yeah.
and it's in the system. So we have to work on it, and we have to keep working on it. And I think now it's much better, Valerie, because before, if you gave birth even in a hospital, modern hospital, in 2001, 2002, it's still happening. Oh, are you Muslim? My brother was asked, and my brother said yes because he had a baby girl, and the nurse said, "Do you want to also include circumcision for your baby daughter?" And my brother was like quite, you know, we were in our early 30s at that time, and he's like, "What to do, sister?" Asked me. No, because you know I'm already doing the research for the documentary, and then the nurse said to me, "You know, it's not like mutilation; it's just a little scratch." What? You want to scratch a baby? No. So, you know, it's also in the we need to educate the nurse, yeah, nurse
The
school
nurse,
for
okay.
the nurse. I think that's also important.
Okay, so I think it's the big issue and the key for this issue right now. It's education
And money.
and money.
Yes, funding.
Money, that's true. So it's like because to invest in women actually need money, but the benefit it's really huge, right?
I told you, if you invest in women and women have access to the same opportunity, education, work, and so on, you increase your GDP by 22% at a minimum. Right. So I must say, look at such a return on investment, seriously. And secondly, why? It's just, for me, it's a question of logic. When you have half of the world population that is composed of women, why should they be less? Why should they be given less? This has absolutely no sense. You know, you can talk about tradition, culture, whatever. Nothing justifies that. You know, women and men should be given the exact same opportunities and rights simply because they do have the same rights. You remember, as Hillary Clinton was saying, women's rights are human rights. Let's not forget that.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have to end this discussion, but before that, I give the opportunity for Ibu Valerie and Mbak Nia untuk the final speech or the final words for everyone. Ya, Mbak Nia dulu.
Okay, I think for me, I'm just going to talk about my personal experience. Find your sisterhood. It's really, really important. It doesn't have to be blood sisterhood. It can be your friends, it can be your colleagues at work, it can be your friends at your college. Find true sisterhood and then grow together. And if you have some issues, talk about it together. Find, do research, find shelter, find another sisterhood that will help you, because I think it's very important to be able to find empowered women and then having them empower you.
Okay. Ibu Valerie?
Oh, there are many things that we could say because I think we only touched the surface of the issue of women. But just to say that gender equality benefits everybody. And this is what has to be understood. As soon as you really achieve gender equality, men will benefit from it. The entire economy will benefit from it. We see in peace processes, for instance, when women are involved, peace are more sustainable and equitable. So I would say, let us look at the gender equality as an opportunity for humanity, not at all as a burden. And that's why when we talk about investment, it's an investment with so much return on investment that really it should make sense for any politics in the world to include women. And finally, as I say, women's rights are human rights.
Human rights.
And a society can only flourish when all people benefit from the same rights everywhere. And that is why in the UN we are fighting so strong to leave no one behind, because as long as you leave some people behind, the society continues to be limping.
Yeah.
So let us not leave half of the world population behind. Let us not leave the people who live in remote community. Let us not leave behind the indigenous population. Let us not leave people who are from different minority. This is while integrating and including everybody that we will have a balanced, happy society.
We move forward together.
Exactly.
Okay. Ibu Valerie dan Mbak Nia, thank you for the insightful conversation. Sayangnya kita harus mengakhiri program ini. Sekali lagi terima kasih buat sahabat Tempo yang sudah menyaksikan Tempo Talks siang hari ini. Saya Purwani Dia Prabandari. Sahabat Tempo bisa menyaksikan Tempo Talks berikutnya dengan topik yang tak kalah menarik tentu saja dan tamu-tamu yang luar biasa juga. Selamat Hari Perempuan Internasional, sampai jumpa lagi di Tempo Talks berikutnya.